trust the process. Cesar Rodriguez's father was a lifelong officer in the U.S. Army. But when Cesar, born 1959, chose to attend the Citadel, the military college of South Carolina, it was not because he was determined to follow in his father's footsteps. He was probably heading toward a career in business. He decided, however, that he needed some discipline in life, and there was no more rigorous environment than the Citadel. One morning in 1978, during his sophomore year, Rodriguez's roommate told him that he was going to take the exams that the Army, Navy, and Air Force were offering for entrance into the aviation branches of their forces. Rodriguez decided to come along and take the exams just for the hell of it. To his surprise, a few days later he was notified that he had been accepted by the Air Force for their pilot training program. The initial training, to take place while he was still at the Citadel, meant taking flying lessons in a Cessna. Figuring that would be fun, he entered the program, not entirely sure how far he would take it. He passed the training exams rather easily. He enjoyed the mental challenge, the complete focus that flying required. Perhaps it would be interesting to take the next step. And so, after graduating from the Citadel in 1981, he was sent to the 10-month pilot instruction school at Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma. At Vance, however, he discovered that he was suddenly in over his head. Now they were training on a subsonic jet, the T-37. He had to wear a 10-pound helmet and a 40-pound parachute on his back. The cockpit was unbearably small and hot. The instructor sat uncomfortably close in the seat beside him, observing his every move. The stress of performing, the heat, the physical pressures of flying at such speeds would make him sweat profusely and shake. He felt as though the jet itself was pounding and beating him as he flew. And then there were so many more variables to be aware of in flying a jet. Working on the simulator, he could fly with relative confidence and feel as if he were in control. But once he was strapped into the jet itself, he could not suppress a feeling of panic and uncertainty. His mind could not keep up with all of the information he had to process, and it was difficult to prioritize his tasks. Much to his dismay, several months into training he received failing marks on 2 consecutive flights and was benched from flying for an entire week. He had never failed at anything before. It was a matter of pride that he had conquered everything that had been presented to him so far in life. Now he faced a possibility that would devastate him. 70 students had started out in the course, but almost every week one of them was cut from the program. It was a ruthless, whittling down process. It looked as if he would be the next one to be cut, and such cuts were final. Once he was allowed back into the plane, he would only have a few chances to prove himself. He had already been trying his hardest. Where had he gone wrong? Perhaps unconsciously he had become intimidated and afraid of the flying process itself. Now he was more afraid of failing. He thought back to his days in high school. Despite his relatively short height, he had managed to become the quarterback of his high school football team. Back then, he had also experienced moments of doubt and even panic. He had discovered, however, that through rigorous training, mental and physical, he could overcome his fear and almost any deficiency in his skill level. In football practice, placing himself in circumstances that had made him feel uncertain had helped him to become familiar with the situation and not so afraid. What was necessary was to trust the process and the results that would come from more practice. This would have to be the way forward in his current situation. He tripled his time with the simulator, habituating his mind to the sensation of so many stimuli. He spent his off hours visualizing himself in the cockpit, repeating the maneuvers he was weakest at. Once he was allowed back in the plane, he focused much harder, knowing he would have to make the most of each precious session. Whenever there was a chance to have more airtime, for instance, when another student was sick, he grabbed it. Slowly, day by day, he found a way to calm himself in the pilot seat and get a better handle on all of the complex operations. In the 2 weeks after being allowed back into the plane, he had managed to rescue his position for the time being. He was now ranked somewhere in the middle of the group. With 10 weeks remaining in the program, Rodriguez took stock of the situation. He had come too far not to succeed. He enjoyed the challenge, he loved flying, and now what he wanted more than anything in life was to become a fighter pilot. That would mean graduating from the program near the very top. Among his group were several golden boys, young men who had a natural flair for flying. They not only handled the intense pressures, they fed off of them. He was the opposite of a golden boy, but that had been the story of his life. He had succeeded through his determination before, and now it would have to be the same. In these final weeks, he was to train on the supersonic T-38, and he asked his new instructor, Wheels Wheeler, to work him to death. He had to move up in the rankings, and he was prepared to do whatever it took. Wheeler obliged him. He made Rodriguez repeat the same maneuver 10 times more than the golden boys, until he was physically sick. He homed in on all of Rodriguez's flying weaknesses and made him practice on the things he hated the most. His criticisms were brutal. One day, however, as he was flying the T-38, Rodriguez had a strange and wonderful sensation. It seemed like he could feel the plane itself at the edge of his fingertips. This is how it must be for the golden boys, he thought. Only for him, it had taken nearly 10 months of intense training. His mind no longer felt mired in all the details. It was vague, but he could sense the possibility of a higher way of thinking, seeing the larger picture of flying in formation, while also commanding the complex operations in the cockpit. This sensation would come and go, but the feeling made all of the work worthwhile. In the end, Rodriguez graduated 3rd in his class and was promoted to fighter pilot lead in training. The same process would now repeat itself in an even more competitive environment. He would have to outdo the golden boys through practice and sheer determination. In this manner, he slowly rose through the ranks to become a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. During the 1990s, his 3 air-to-air kills in active duty brought him closer to the designation of ace than any American pilot since the Vietnam War, and earned him the nickname, the last American ace. What separates masters from others is often something surprisingly simple. Whenever we learn a skill, we frequently reach a point of frustration. What we are learning seems beyond our capabilities. Giving in to these feelings, we unconsciously quit on ourselves before we actually give up. Among the dozens of pilots in Rodriguez's class who never made the cut, almost all of them had the same talent level as he did. The difference is not simply a matter of determination, but more of trust and faith. Many of those who succeed in life have had the experience in their youth of having mastered some skill, a sport or game, a musical instrument, a foreign language, and so on. Buried in their minds is the sensation of overcoming their frustrations and entering the cycle of accelerated returns. In moments of doubt in the present, the memory of the past experience rises to the surface. Filled with trust in the process, they trudge on well past the point at which others slow down or mentally quit. When it comes to mastering a skill, time is the magic ingredient. Assuming your practice proceeds at a steady level, over days and weeks, certain elements of the skill become hardwired. Slowly, the entire skill becomes internalized, part of your nervous system. The mind is no longer mired in the details, but can see the larger picture. It is a miraculous sensation, and practice will lead you to that point, no matter the talent level you are born with. The only real impediment to this is yourself and your emotions, boredom, panic, frustration, insecurity. You cannot suppress such emotions. They are normal to the process and are experienced by everyone, including masters. What you can do is have faith in the process. The boredom will go away once you enter the cycle. The panic disappears after repeated exposure. The frustration is a sign of progress, a signal that your mind is processing complexity and requires more practice. The insecurities will transform into their opposites when you gain mastery. Trusting this will all happen, you will allow the natural learning process to move forward, and everything else will fall into place.